James had just lifted his glass when Lydia's coworker rose from the center table, smoothed his velvet dinner jacket, and tapped his spoon against a champagne flute. The ballroom at the Intercontinental in Buckhead glowed with white lights and silver ornaments, full of black professionals dressed like money and December ambition. Then the man grinned, leaned toward Lydia, and said, "Here's to the real MVPs this holiday season, and to the loser paying the bills at home while the rest of us enjoy the party." Laughter burst around the table before the words even settled. James felt every eye turn. Lydia laughed too, and that hurt most. James didn't move right away. He sat in that polished chair, one hand still on the stem of his glass, while the music from a live band drifted through the room like nothing had happened. Lydia had her head tilted back, shoulders shaking with laughter, one manicured hand resting on the arm of the man everybody in her office jokingly called her work husband. His name was Darren Cole, Regional Partnerships Director, famous smile, married father of two, always overdressed and too comfortable in other people's homes and marriages. James saw coworkers smirk, whisper, and glance away. He had been insulted before. He had never been publicly erased. The cruelest part was that James had not even wanted to attend. He'd gotten off a 12-hour shift at the distribution center near Hartsfield-Jackson, changed in the car, and rushed across Atlanta traffic because Lydia insisted it mattered. "It's a family vibe this year," she had said. "Everybody's bringing spouses." James had shown up with a clean lineup, a dark green suit, and the kind of tired loyalty-good husbands wear without asking for credit. He'd brought Lydia's favorite perfume in a small gift bag and planned to surprise her with weekend tickets to Savannah. Instead, the surprise came first, in front of the whole department. Lydia did not even pretend to defend him. She just sipped her champagne and let Darren keep smiling like he had won something. "Oh my God, Darren," one woman said, laughing into her napkin. Another leaned over and whispered, "That was wild." But she was grinning too. James looked at Lydia, waiting for some flicker of shame, some tiny movement that said she remembered the man she had promised to honor. All he got was a shrug and a half-smile that said, "Don't be sensitive." James nodded once, slow and controlled. Under the table, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He already knew who it was. 3 hours earlier, before the party started, James had received an email that changed everything. The sender was anonymous, but the attachment was not. Screenshots, Lydia and Darren, flirty messages, hotel confirmations, work emails turned personal, then shameless. A thread from Darren read, "He's probably home paying the bills while I'm stealing your attention again." Lydia replied with 3 laughing emojis and, "Let him. He's good for stability, not spark." James had sat in his car in the parking garage, staring at the screen until the words stopped blurring. He should have driven away. Instead, he went upstairs, shook hands, smiled politely, and let Betrayal walk itself onto a stage. 10 years earlier, none of this would have seemed possible. James met Lydia at a food truck festival in downtown Atlanta after she roasted him for standing in the longest line in the park. "You waiting 40 minutes for shrimp tacos means one of 2 things," she told him. "Either they're life-changing or you don't have enough home training." James laughed, stepped aside, and told her she could order first as she promised not to judge his choice. She smiled, all bright eyes and confidence, and said, "Too late for that." They ended up sharing a picnic bench, talking until sunset, and missing 2 whole performances. Back then, Lydia had a laugh that felt like good weather. She was from Chicago by way of Houston, a Howard grad with quick wit, perfect brows, and a talent for making ordinary places feel like scenes from a movie. James was Atlanta-born and raised, Morehouse educated, steady and warm, the kind of man who ironed his jeans and called his mother every Sunday. Their chemistry came easy. On their 3rd date, he took Lydia skating at Cascade and fell so hard trying to show off that he slid into a birthday table, knocking over a lemon cake and 3 juice boxes. Lydia laughed until she cried. Their early marriage was built on the kind of love that looks small from outside but feels huge to the people inside it. Friday night takeout in East Point. Sunday church in a packed sanctuary where older ladies pinched Lydia's cheeks and told James not to mess up. Long drives to New Orleans, Nashville, and Savannah with old-school R&B playing low while Lydia sang too confidently and too loudly. They had inside jokes about everything. James called Lydia Mayor because she could walk into any room and know half the people by dessert. Lydia called James warranty because, in her words, you always come through even when life breaks down. They had funny years, too. Once, during their second anniversary, James tried to make lobster pasta from a YouTube video and somehow turned the kitchen into a smoke demonstration for the whole block. Lydia stood in the doorway waving a dish towel, tears running down her face from laughing, while James stared at the scorched pan like it had betrayed him personally. Another time, they hosted a cookout in College Park, and James swore he had mastered the grill, only to drop an entire tray of chicken right onto his own loafers. Lydia laughed so hard she had to sit down on the patio steps and hold her stomach. James loved how Lydia used to reach for him without thinking. In grocery store lines, at stoplights, in movie theaters when the sad part came, and she acted like she was not crying. There was a season when they danced in the kitchen while gumbo simmered, and a season when they saved every spare dollar for a small brick house with a front porch and room for a family they kept saying they would start next year. James believed in those years. He believed in her. He believed that loyalty could anchor anything if you gave it enough patience. That belief did not die fast. It faded in pieces. The first crack came disguised as ambition. Lydia's job at a medical marketing firm in Midtown started getting her access to nicer events, bigger clients, and louder people. Darren entered the picture that same year, transferred from Dallas with bright teeth, expensive watches, and the kind of charisma that made weak boundaries feel stylish. Lydia joked about him at first. "My office husband is ridiculous," she would say, rolling her eyes while smiling anyway. James thought it was corny but harmless. Then the stories changed tone. Darren bought her coffee. Darren saved her a seat. Darren said James was lucky. Darren knew too much about their marriage. Then came the comments, small and sharp. Lydia began treating James's steadiness like mediocrity. She compared him to men she worked with who earned more, dressed louder, traveled farther. If James came home tired from operations work, Lydia would say, "You know stress isn't a personality, right?" If he planned a quiet date night, she posted photos but complained later that he lacked spontaneity. The warmth thinned. The respect went first. James tried harder because that is what decent men often do when love starts slipping. They offer more of the very thing being taken for granted. He worked extra shifts, bought flowers, prayed longer, and got laughed at anyway. The night James first grew suspicious, Lydia came home after midnight smelling like hotel lotion and expensive whiskey, claiming her team had stayed late wrapping gifts for a client gala. Her hair was perfect. Her lipstick was fresh. Her explanation had too many details and not enough truth. James asked one question too calmly, and Lydia snapped like he had insulted her. "Not everybody lives on a warehouse clock," she said, then disappeared into the bathroom with her phone. After that, patterns formed. Screen tilts, soft smiles at late texts, sudden gym trips, extra perfume for boring meetings. James saw it. He just hated believing it. Still, he kept trying to say what she no longer respected. For their 10th anniversary, James booked a private weekend in Savannah, right off River Street, with a carriage ride and dinner at a place Lydia once called romantic enough to fix anything. He tucked the reservation printout into a card and wrote her a note about grateful love, second chances, and the life they built from almost nothing. He even bought her a gold bracelet she had mentioned months earlier in passing. While he was planning all that, Lydia was apparently planning something too, matching holiday party outfits with Darren, and laughing at the husband financing her comfort from the background. The anonymous email woke James up fully. He spent 2 days doing what pain forces smart people to do when emotion finally surrenders to evidence. He checked shared account activity. He reviewed calendar invites Lydia forgot to delete. He noticed hotel charges near work conferences she never really attended. He matched dates from the screenshots and nights Lydia had called saying she was helping close out a campaign. Every trail led to Darren. Every answer made James colder, calmer, more focused. By the time he stood in that ballroom hearing strangers laugh at his marriage, he was no longer confused. Hurt, yes. Humiliated, absolutely. But not powerless. James also learned something worse than the affair. Darren had been using Lydia's access at work to secure advantage on a promotion project. The same late nights they dressed up as harmless office bonding involved shared client files, unauthorized planning, and cozy favoritism across department lines. Lydia had forwarded internal documents to Darren's personal email more than once. It was enough to damage credibility, maybe jobs. James did not care about revenge for revenge's sake. He cared about truth. He cared that two people had built a private game using his marriage as comedy and their company's trust as a toy. That kind of arrogance rarely survives daylight. So James made a choice that required no yelling and no broken glass. He forwarded the screenshots to a new email folder, preserved metadata, and sent everything to himself from a private account Lydia did not know existed. Then he searched Darren online and found the wife, Monique Cole, school counselor, active church volunteer, mother of two girls with matching Christmas dresses in every family photo. James stared at her smiling face for a long time before closing the laptop. He was not eager to ruin a stranger's life, but he knew one thing for certain: lies protected in silence only grow more expensive for the innocent. Back in the ballroom, Darren's toast had ended and the room drifted back toward music, drinks, and office gossip. Lydia leaned toward James like he was the one behaving strangely. "Please don't make this a thing," she whispered, still smiling for the people around them. James looked at her, then at Darren, who raised his glass again with that smug, holiday commercial grin. James smiled right back. "I won't," he said. And he meant it. He would not make a scene in that room. He would make a record. Sometimes the hardest revenge is refusing public chaos because private proof travels farther, cleaner, and with better timing. James waited until the party ended. He drove Lydia home in total silence except for the heater and the occasional hum of traffic on I-85. Lydia kept checking her reflection in the mirror and muttering about Darren being too much, as if that erased her laughter. At home, she kicked off her heels, asked if he was sulking, and went upstairs to shower. James sat at the kitchen table under the yellow light and opened his laptop. He forwarded the entire email thread, screenshots, hotel confirmations, timestamps, and a brief note to Monique. Then he prepared one more email, addressed to Darren's department director, HR, and legal compliance. James's note was short, calm, and devastating. He wrote that he believed there had been an inappropriate relationship between two employees that appeared to overlap with professional favoritism and possible misuse of internal information. He attached only what was necessary and avoided dramatic language. He didn't insult Darren. He didn't insult Lydia. He let the receipt speak in their own cold accent. Then he hit send. The whoosh of that final email felt almost too quiet for the size of what it carried. Upstairs, water still ran in the shower. Lydia was humming one of her favorite songs, unaware that her holiday joke had just become the last comfortable night of her life. Morning arrived with consequences already moving. Darren's wife replied first, not with rage but with one sentence that made James set the phone down and close his eyes. "Thank you for telling me the truth before they lied to me again." 20 minutes later, Lydia's company sent a meeting request marked urgent. Darren texted Lydia 11 times before 8:30. By 9, he had called her 3 times and once by FaceTime, which he ignored because she was too busy panicking over the email from HR. James drank his coffee black and watched her face lose color line by line. "What did you do?" Lydia whispered. James answered, "What you forced me to." The next week turned into a public collapse disguised as corporate process. Darren was placed under formal investigation, pulled from the promotion track, and quietly removed from the mentorship committee he loved parading around as proof of leadership. Lydia was suspended pending review. Rumors spread fast because office gossip moves faster than official memos and always adds drums. People who laugh at the party suddenly stopped making eye contact. The same co-workers who once called Darren and Lydia work spouses now acted like they barely knew either of them. James heard all of this secondhand and said almost nothing. Silence felt better now that truth was doing the talking. Then Monique filed for divorce. That part hit Darren harder than HR ever could. He sent Lydia frantic messages blaming her for not deleting enough, for getting sloppy, for not protecting him. Those messages eventually surfaced too, because arrogant men always confuse the women around them for shields. James did not need to expose anything else. Darren and Lydia were exposing themselves just fine. Within a month, Darren was demoted to a lesser role under a supervisor younger than him, with reduced privileges, a smaller bonus track, and no chance of touching the regional director position he had bragged about for a year. Pride can survive scandal. It struggles with humiliation. Lydia's fallout was uglier because it reached home. Her family found out through whispers first, then facts. Her aunt from Houston called crying. Her older brother flew in from Charlotte ready to defend her, until James calmly showed him enough evidence to turn his anger in the correct direction. Friends disappeared. The women who once reposted Lydia's marriage advice in soft life captions went silent. One line sister texted, "Girl, not the husband jokes while cheating with Kevin Samuels in a turtleneck." And even Lydia, in the middle of implosion, looked wounded by how accurate it was. James almost laughed when he read that. Almost. For all the pain, there were funny moments too, because life insists on embarrassing foolish people with perfect timing. One of Darren's dramatic voice notes to Lydia got accidentally forwarded to a department group chat when he meant to send it privately. In it, he said, "I am not built for adversity," with the seriousness of a war speech, then started crying halfway through a sentence about losing his parking space. Somebody in accounting turned that phrase into a joke within hours. Another coworker quietly renamed the Office Secret Santa spreadsheet "loser paying bills" by mistake, or maybe not by mistake. Even James, bruised as he was, laughed at that. James did not go back and forth with Lydia once everything broke open. No screaming matches. No revenge speeches. He simply became unavailable to manipulation. He met with a lawyer in downtown Atlanta, changed passwords, separated accounts, and packed Lydia's things into labeled boxes of the kind of neatness that announces emotional retirement. When she tried tears, he stayed still. When she tried anger, he stayed still. When she said Darren meant nothing, James almost smiled at the irony of hearing nothing cause so much damage. "You laughed while he called me a loser," James said quietly. "That's what ended us, not just the affair." The disrespect was a grave. The official company outcome came just before New Year's. Lydia was terminated for misconduct involving policy violations and failure to disclose a compromising relationship that affected workplace trust. Darren kept his job only after signing a disciplinary agreement, losing authority, and accepting a humiliating reassignment. In other words, the company spared him while shrinking him. For a man who lived on image, that was almost worse than unemployment. James heard Darren had started avoiding office parties and churchmen's breakfast because too many people suddenly found him hilarious. The same mouth that toasted somebody else's humiliation had become the punchline in every room that once applauded him. Once Lydia moved out, James had to meet the quiet version of himself again. That part was harder than the revenge. The house in East Point felt too clean, too still, too honest. But healing came in small things. His mother brought over peach cobbler and too much advice. His boys took him to a Hawks game and clowned him for dressing like he had a second interview after the first quarter. He returned to the gym, started sleeping better, and found relief in simple routines. On one cold Saturday, he drove to Savannah alone and used the anniversary reservation anyway, sitting by the river and choosing peace over bitterness. A few months later, James ran into an old friend named Maya at a bookstore in Decatur. She wore big earrings, smelled like vanilla and cedar, and laughed at one of his corny jokes hard enough to make him remember what warmth sounded like when it was sincere. There was no rush, no rescue, just a gentle reminder that betrayal is not the end of your story unless you keep building your life around the person who broke it. James learned that revenge might expose liars, but dignity rebuilds you. Justice can close a chapter. Healing is what teaches your heart how to read again afterward. So the moral was not that revenge is sweet, even though James would be lying if he said justice felt bad. The real lesson was simpler and sharper. Never confuse a patient person for a weak one. Never mock the hand holding your life together. And never let workplace flirtation, public jokes, or private disrespect wear the costume of harmless fun when somebody's vows are bleeding underneath it. Lydia and Darren laughed at the man paying the bills. In the end, James did not raise his voice, throw a punch, or beg for mercy. He just sent the truth where it belonged, and truth ruined him more completely than anger ever could. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and share this video with your friends. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story drop.